from divination. This is what ruined Greece and other countries back in the ancient days, because they listened to the spirits. Divination was one form of listening to the spirits, of trying to figure out what's going on through basically trying to catch unawares the reality that's out there, and you want to extract a little portion of it. You don't want it aware that you're trying to extract a portion, because then it might influence it. So you try to unaware catch some little thing and say, okay, here's your number. There's where reality is. While these numbers can be used for that, basically what they will tell you is they will tell you the spirit of the moment, whatever that moment might be, because it's the same like with tarot cards. If you pick a tarot card, well, the next moment, and you reshuffle the deck and everything like that, and you pick through again, it's very, very highly unlikely you're going to get the same card again. You'll get a different card, because your spirit will have changed and the conditions will have changed slightly. But will they be that significant? Well, okay, from that moment to that moment, yes, it was accurate for that specific instance, with everything all at play, all the different forces. But then it's such a trivial play, you see. So when you pick up the next one, all that, the trivialness of it has changed, and so it's very fleeting, very inaccurate, I guess we could say, unless, like we say, if a person is very at one with inner and outer, with Jehovah's body being the outer body, and his spirit being his inner portion, and his soul being part of his inner portion, and his mind being part of the inner portion, and if you can be one with all that, why then you probably wouldn't need cards to let you know in the first place. But that being said, it does help a person to focus, perhaps, on these things. But that aside, or with that in mind, because we're looking at completeness here, number 10, the good and the bad, so to speak, or the ripe and the unripe, if you prefer. And even in the case of the unripe, you see, they're still developing their talent. They're just reading, perhaps, or applying their talent to something that's sort of insignificant. It's like spinning one's wheels, and you don't get very far with it, but you do have a little bit of motion, and that's unsensible. But that is essentially is a completion of the cosmos. It's the and the synthesis too as well. But yet we still have 2 more to go on this, the synthesis of the cosmos. And there's actually what follows number 10, which is a completeness, is 11, which is the druk, and it's shown as the circle with the downward chevron there, and going down to the corners. Now the ancients understood this as being like earth evils and poison, and not very good at all. It's like being down in the muck and in the mire and not being able to climb up out of it or get out of it somehow. Well, that's the lower interpretation. That's an interpretation that man, corporeal man, especially in his early years, could look out and perceive and go, oh yeah, I understand that. So, but there is a higher interpretation, understanding of what 11 is. And what 11 is, basically, is recall what we said with regard to 1 and the 0. And so if we look at 11, because 10 is completeness, and so this is why the decimal system is such a great system. And the base 10 counting numbers, it's because now it's 1, 1. You have a foundation coming out of a foundation, yes, and that would be a meaning of number 11. And in reality, what it represents is a reflection of the foundation. Since we're working in the set of 4, the third set of 4 has to do with the synthesis of the cosmos. And the third unit of that would be 9, 10, 11 is 11. So it's the synthesis of the synthesis of the cosmos. But that gets a little bit confusing, and so that's why we like to have other terms and under other understandings, other words for the meanings of the symbols of the cycles. And so the first cycle has to do with love as well as foundation, as we mentioned. The second one has to do with wisdom, and the third one has to do with power. The synthesis and has to do with power as well. So when we look at number 11, it being the third symbol of the synthesis of the cosmos, being 9, 10, 11, 12. 9, 10, 11, that's one. That's foundation and the abstraction, and then the synthesis. Or we could also say it's the power of synthesis, or the synthesis of power, number 11, with regard to the cosmos. One of the reasons why 11 is such a difficult term, or time, when you're looking at cycle spans of time, and you get to the 11th cycle, because it is a reflection of, or a representation of the first 10 of the complete foundation. It's a reflection of all that. And so it's very difficult to get a perfect replica of the foundation. Or to have a perfect build from it, a perfect copy, so to speak, or a clone, or whatever you want to call it. But why would you want that? Well, it's not exactly that, because you recall that it's the 11 is the foundation that comes out of the foundation, and so that represents growth as well. We could consider that to be growth. And recall also that when you have the circle and you have the horizon there, that under here you have corporea, and up here you have a heaven. So you have heaven and earth, but also you have light and then darkness down here. And so in number 11 being down here and pointing to the corners not only represents darkness and going down into corporea, but it also represents going toward the evil, which is, the corners down there. So it has this tendency to go. Now remember, it's not always evil though. And looking at it from a higher aspect, that represents fullness. And so it's actually going toward a fullness that's down in corporea, and it's down in darkness and in depth, and it's going towards fullness. But remember, in darkness, that's also where evil can hide in darkness. Evil loves darkness because it can hide in darkness. And normally, if you look at the 11th cycle of events, if you have a cycle of like a social order, when it gets to the 11th cycle, there's a lot of stress and there's a lot of difficulty involved. That would have been the second difficulty. The first difficulty would have come back on number 7. Because 7, recall, is the drift from the ideal to the fullness, which is to the extremes. And if you have too much of the ideal, or you don't get the ideal quite right and all that, and as you go toward the extremes, it's going to collapse on you. And so that the number 7, is the first really sort of difficulty, or it's the challenge, and it's the limits, the limitations, and all that. And the second one, which is much greater, the difficulty, is number 11.